Welcome to Michael Potts F1, everything Formula One, but from a photographer's point of view. Round 17, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. That was quite possibly the best race of the season so far. And that's a big claim considering how many great races we've had recently. In my A to Z guide, I did mention that we were due for a big one, and Baku delivered. Oscar Piastri produced the drive of his career to hold off a charging Charles Leclerc to claim only his second win in Formula One. If his first win was tainted by team orders, this one was pure Oscar. Complete with now what's becoming a trademark aggressive overtake for the lead, and then dogged defense to keep the Ferrari behind him. Everything was perfect, apart from his celebration. He really needs to work on this, and I don't mean that little wobble that he had when he got out the car. He just needs to give it more welly, more pizzazz. Someone needs to sit him down in front of clips of Senna, Schumacher, Vettel, Alonso and Hamilton so he can see how it should be done. This win has given McLaren the lead in the World Championship, a feat that would have seemed impossible given where they were 39 races ago. Stone cold last in the championship. This is the first time they've led the Formula One Championship since 2014, and that only lasted one race. The last time they won it was in 1998. But this win was as much an Oscar win as it was a team win. Lando sacrificed his race to hold up Perez, who was destined for victory at one stage. This allowed his teammate to stop and come out ahead of the Red Bull driver, and that support was as vital as Oscar's outstanding defense against Charles Leclerc. And Charles drove another great race for Ferrari, and it appears that Monza was not just a blip. The prancing horse is back. Both cars were right there in the mix, and now they're only 31 points behind Red Bull. They're going to Singapore, and that's always been a track where they've been strong at. So we could see further changes in the constructors title. While the team can take so many positives from a strong performance, it's probably a race that they've lost as much as Oscar won. Leclerc had an 8-second lead before his pit stop, and in Formula One terms, 8 seconds is massive. Formula One is incredibly exciting at the moment, with so many teams and drivers all so closely matched. We definitely deserve a few more Drive to Survive episodes just so they can cover everything that's happened. And in this race, it wasn't just the big four teams that are providing entertainment. The new kids did exceptionally well. Ollie Behrman, standing in for Kevin Magnussen, scored points again. It does make him the first driver to score points for two different teams in the same Formula One season. But all eyes were on Franco Colapinto, who scored points in only his second race. He managed to achieve an 8th place, which is a lot better than Logan did in many more races. Things were not looking that good at the start of the weekend when he crashed in practice. But we must remember, this is the first time Franco has ever driven this track, and it's a massively complex circuit to nail. Just look at how many other drivers crashed. But his ability to bounce back from that is incredibly impressive. And it was wonderful seeing him in Parc Fermé celebrating with the other drivers after the race. It looks like he's kind of always been there. It also looked like he was celebrating his first podium rather than his first point. But still, he's a wonderfully likable guy, super positive, and a great asset to Formula One. This does pose a very interesting question for Sauber's second seat. We now have 3 candidates in the mix. There's the 10-time race winner Valtteri Bottas. Franco Colapinto is throwing his name into the hat, and there is now Gabriele Bortoleto, the new leader of the Formula 2 Championship. He's just 19 years old, from Sao Paulo in Brazil. He's had a glittering junior career, mentored by none other than Fernando Alonso, and he's part of the McLaren Young Driver program. He won Formula 3 in 2023 at the first time of asking, and if he can close out Formula 2 with only 2 rounds remaining, well, that would put him in the league of Charles Leclerc and Oscar Piastri. A win from last place in the Monza feature race made a lot of people sit up and take notice. The kid's definitely very, very talented. There was a huge crash at the start of the F2 race. Kushmani stalled and 2 cars hit him from behind. I was shooting from the pit wall but was lucky enough to be quite a long way away from the action, so completely safe. This is a great track to photograph, as a lot of street circuits are. There are many places where you can get on top of the roofs of buildings, and here's an example of this wonderful vista, including the flame tower at the end of the straight. Getting on top of the cinema delivers great shots as the cars drive up the old city walls, but this shot is not as good as it used to be. Now that the race has changed times from spring to autumn, there's been a change in the sun's position, and it's taken a little bit of the magic away. It's still a very interesting image. Now, the cars are in near darkness. They do get incredibly close to the wall here. Here's a shot of Max removing a bit of the advertising as he glances the barrier. The change in season has also increased the contrast of some of the shots, especially those later in the day where the cars are coming down the main straight. I'm not sure how you found that on TV, but I found it very difficult to identify which cars were which. In many cases, the images looked like very dramatic black and white shots. Will Smith and Naomi Campbell were at the track of the race weekend. Campbell looked very happy to be back at a Formula 1 track, and she was with her former fiancé Flavio Briatore on the grid. This was a horrible weekend for Red Bull. They did bring a brand new floor and a reworked rear end. Initially, it looked like it worked. On Friday, Max was fastest in the first practice session. And Perez looked incredible all weekend. He really comes alive in these circuits. He managed to out-qualify Max for the first time in 33 races. During the race, he was able to keep pace with the leaders, and he was on track for a podium. But on lap 50, he crashed with Sainz spectacularly. It was ruled a racing incident, but both drivers could have done more to avoid it. It was a particularly bad blow for Perez, who's enjoyed a miserable run since China. He hasn't been on the podium once since then in a feature race, and he's only scored 62 points compared to Max's 203. He's going to need to dig really deep to recover from this latest setback. But I think things might be even worse on the other side of the garage, because I don't really know where Max goes from here. He looked a shadow of his former self. He's now even slipped behind his teammate, and he really should have finished 7th, which would have been his worst race result for races that he's finished in this year. What's most worrying is how Red Bull's upgrades just don't appear to work. In this race, they reverted to the concept that they used at the start of the year, rather than the B-spec car which was introduced in Hungary. It's unlikely we're going to see new parts in Singapore, so the next chance will be Austin. And that's a sprint race. And that makes it very difficult for the teams to understand what the new changes will do to the car setup, and how to make the most of those new changes. Add to that, there's another price tag of a very costly rebuild to Perez's car, and there's the possibility that both drivers will need to take grid penalties for new parts before the end of the season. Things are really not looking very good. There is one silver lining, however. Max does have a massive lead. He needs to defend 8 points a race and 1 point from each sprint, and at the moment, Lando's making that a bit easy for him. This is another race, like Monza, where Lando should have pushed the advantage. He didn't. Okay, he was desperately unlucky to get a phantom yellow flag in qualifying, but drivers should have time for 3 attempts in Q1, and him not making it to Q2 did compromise his race. He did drive like a champion, recovering to 4th, but he didn't eat into Verstappen's lead enough. He only took 3 points out of the Dutchman. And he's consistently not putting together complete weekends. And far too often, he's leaving too many points on the table. He's just not yet driving like a world champion. That was the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. I really do hope you've enjoyed it. If you'd like to see some more photographs from the race, there's a link in the description below. And if you haven't yet, please do like and subscribe. Our next stop is Singapore, and I'm heading there today. So until then, goodbye.